Hey everyone, it's Natalie Bencavanga, and welcome to Facts Over Fear. There are a lot of fires happening right now at the national level and at local levels all around the nation, but there is a group of people that continues to be put in the crossfire, and that is the trans community. So I don't want us to lose sight that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, no matter how you identify. And the Supreme Court has been doing some dirty work under the radar right now that we're going to get into. In a 6-3 decision that happened last month, the United States Supreme Court ruled that states can lawfully ban transgender girls and women from competing in female school and college sports. Now, the justices concluded that these state bans do not violate Title IX or the U.S. Constitution. And on top of that, for months, the headlines have suggested that the Trump administration's ban on transgender military service has been a settled issue. Now, after all, the United States allowed the policy to take effect earlier this year, paving the way for thousands of transgender service members to face discharge. But here's what's also been receiving very little attention. Just weeks later, a federal appeals court ruled that applying that ban to active duty transgender service members is unconstitutional. This was a major legal victory that has just been flying under the radar. So if your mind is blown and probably confused like mine is, you're in the right place. How can these two different courts analyzing transgender rights, people's human rights, arrive at such different outcomes? And what does this say about the current legal landscape, and where is the fight headed next? I'm so happy to always have my friend and attorney Sophia Zoe Kilmer here joining me to break down the constitutional questions at the heart of these cases, what the courts got right, what they've gotten wrong, and why these decisions can really shape the future of equal protection under the law for years to come. No big deal. How are you, Sophia?
I've been better, but
I know. And not just because you just had dental surgery, which is just like, I'm so honored that you still showed up, even with, a little bit of the dental work happening. But more importantly, because these are some serious issues and contradictions all happening at once. Let's start with what's going on with the transgender ban on girls and sports and how they claim this doesn't violate Title IX. Talk to us, break that down for us, for people like myself who are not attorneys.
yeah, and it's not just that it doesn't violate Title IX, but it's that it doesn't violate the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution, and I think that
Mhm.
that's the much more um, insidious,
Mhm.
part of the decision. That's much more, um, in my opinion, intellectually bankrupt and
Mhm.
also very concerning. But ultimately, they are very different cases. First and foremost, this is the West Virginia versus um, BPJ um,
Mhm.
case, what I'll refer to it as throughout. And it is a case, it was two different cases, but one of the plaintiffs, honestly, because of the complete and total bullying and online, you know, targeting that she went through up in Idaho,
Mhm.
really asked for her name to be taken off the case. They wouldn't allow her to have that happen. She had wanted to participate in college women's sports and had been going through transitioning. Um, and ultimately, they didn't really talk about the facts of her case nearly as much. But ultimately, both these cases, these cases um, really get to the heart, but the Supreme Court does not, of whether or not transgender women are allowed to be discriminated against by state
Mhm.
legislatures. And that's really what the case decides and determines, is that at a state level, and this is what the case decides, and the holding is states and state legislatures are allowed to enact laws that ban, and I don't really want to parrot the language of the
Sure.
court because I think it's disingenuous and it misses the point of this, the real point of these laws, but they can ban transgender women from girls and women's sports.
Mhm.
Now, what they'll say is that they are allowed to ban biological males who identify as women, which is how absolutely no transgender person will ever call themselves,
Mm.
from women and girls sports. And so, first and foremost, just by adopting the rhetoric of the Heritage Foundation and the other side in the Supreme Court's majority decision, by adopting that rhetoric, they're already implicitly saying and undercutting the transgender identity. And that's really what is so damning and also disappointing about this decision as a transgender woman and a transgender person, which is that this decision undercuts the transgender identity as being valid, which has always been the goal of the Heritage Foundation. But ultimately, the decision finds that the states have, under the scrutiny of intermediate scrutiny, a compelling interest under um, the benefit to society of keeping sports, women's sports, safe and also keeping a competitive balance of excluding biological males. Well, okay, let's just create a complete and total false, straw man
Narrative.
to
Yeah.
burn and destroy. Because guess what? Like, the vast majority of biological males aren't wanting to participate in women's sports. Transgender women and transgender girls are. And so for you to just completely and totally paint this broad brush with the legislature and even the courts, then allowing this broad brush to be like, oh, yeah, these laws are keeping boys out of, biological males out of women's sports for safety and competitive balance of all women. Bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because no, most males are not wanting to engage
Right.
in women's sports. It's just transgender women and transgender girls who are, and they want to because they are women and they are girls. And so to completely and totally miss the point, and then as Justice Kavanaugh, goes on and explains that they're not going to get into the science and that's not their place, which is a betrayal of their responsibility to actually, analyze this decision as it should be under the Equal Protection Clause, they are doing a disservice to both the court, to our Constitution, and to ultimately the subclass of transgender people, which ultimately make up who this law is targeting and is meant to target.
Sure.
And so let's just cut through all of the nonsense and cut through the lies that there's some sort of epidemic here of males or biological males wanting to participate in women's sports. Because one, that's just not true.
Right.
Even in West Virginia, there was one transgender girl who this legislature spent an enormous amount of time targeting, and then legal time and legal money and everything else to take this case all the way up to the Supreme Court to fight this.
Mm.
Think about where their priorities are.
Oh, I
One
know.
transgender girl.
Oh, yes.
And so then you really start to have to ask yourself, what is the real target of these laws? Because is it really the one transgender girl, or is it the idea that now the transgender girls are banned from women and girls sports, that now all women and their gender identity and how they express themselves have to fit into boxes,
That's right.
or they
That's
can now be stereotyped,
100%.
transvestigated, maybe have to go through
Oh,
genital inspections. I mean, there are bigger forces at play here than just keeping out transgender girls from sports.
I'm
For God's sakes,
yeah.
the head of the NCAA said that there was only 11 out of 500,000 women and athletes competing in NCAA sports who identified as transgender. So, really, these laws are a solution to a problem that does not exist,
Yeah.
which is a classic fascist textbook playbook.
Yes.
And if I sound angry, it's because I am. But
I
ultimately,
understand.
I'm very angry and upset because Justice Kavanaugh, you, Justice, the person who got your job, let's just be honest, through
Mm.
complete and total shenanigans, in my opinion. But ultimately, you betray your office, you betray your position, and you have created and written an intellectually dishonest and disingenuous decision that does not accept the reality that these laws are meant to target with animus transgender people, transgender women and girls in particular. And you could have at least been intellectually honest that those were the point of the law and then actually done your job and stated whether or not that animus towards transgender girls could be validated under the guise of safety and competitive balance in women's sports. But instead, you create this complete and total fabrication in your mind where biological males, like who are not transgender, would in any sort of way want to participate in women's sports.
Sophia, I want to ask you because I can hear the frustration, I can hear the anger in your voice. What does this do to a transgender person's sense of humanity? Because when I think of why I always am centering the trans experience on this show or other marginalized groups, it's to connect the dots for people, to let them understand. Like I said at the top of the show, an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And to your point, transgender community members may be the very easy target right now, but they are not necessarily the end goal. The end goal is to continue to shrink how we are allowed to express ourselves so that we can become almost just this little nothing that is easy to control and manipulate by this fascist state. Can you talk about the importance of needing the expression of our humanity right now, however that looks like for you?
Absolutely. My position would be that nothing challenges the status quo of the fascist fit into our box society more than transgender people who everything and everyone around them is telling them this is not quote unquote normal. This is not who you are. This is not, you know, your biological sex. And we know in our souls that this is who we are and we accept it and we accept the consequences of everything else around us and we reject the conformity that society wants to put on us. And I think that terrifies fascists because it is the absolute essence of individualism.
Mm, that is so real. And I want to talk a little bit about that as it pertains to what's going on with the military, because we are seeing a lot of, I'll say the word that you used, shenanigans happening over at the Pentagon under Pete Hegseth, the former weekend host of Faux News. And what's been interesting to me is watching how they keep ping-ponging these different issues around who is acceptable to be in their military and who isn't. And I don't know if you saw recently, but now they're offering up gender affirming care to men in the military with low testosterone, which I thought was fascinating considering their whole rhetoric has been anti gender affirming care. But that's for another day. I just thought it was an interesting thing to sort of note. But can you talk a little bit about what is happening with the circuit courts and what they're saying about the military as it pertains to transgender service people?
Yes, a case called Talbott versus the United States of America,
Mhm.
um, which is really a case that's against Trump
Mhm.
and Hegseth.
Hegseth.
Hegseth. I despise them. They implemented a policy. See, Trump has been on a warpath against transgender people, mostly because he's funded by and put in place by the Heritage Foundation. And one of the targets that they have, and ultimately because it's a window towards delegitimizing all queer people, is
Mhm.
transgender people. It's just who they've targeted. Transgender women in sports was their first, and easiest target they felt like. Um, and they're moving on. But ultimately, Talbott versus the United States of America is a case that was many plaintiffs who had sued essentially the U.S. military because they were being essentially dishonorably discharged for merely just presenting and having and being part of having a transgender identity. It went even further than that. They actually were discharging anyone who had ever even expressed gender dysphoria um,
Mm.
in their lifetime, even as a child. And they were doing it through a policy and through an implementation that was unlike any other medical discharge. They were doing it the way that you would discharge drug addicts or people who had cheated or done other types of misconduct. And it's really all about how the Trump administration's real goal here, and it was the same in women's sports, is to invalidate the transgender identity as valid. It's
Mm.
to demonize it and state that it is, there is only two true genders. That's BS in general. Even medical science would refute that. They are ideologues. And ultimately, their position is that it is dishonorable to essentially be a transgender person. It's just dishonest. You're
Mm.
living in a sex and gender that is different than your biological sex, and therefore you cannot have honor and you are dishonorable. End full stop.
Mm.
And what the court in Talbot found, which is this is a circuit level court. It will be, in my opinion, appealed to the Supreme Court, and I'm very interested to hear what they have to say because it's a very well-reasoned decision, 2-1, and they found that the people who were being discharged, um, it couldn't meet intermediate scrutiny, it couldn't meet rational basis, because ultimately Trump had just been so obvious, and so had Hegseth, of their personal animus towards the transgender community that and they had been so essentially defunct in providing any sort of evidence to support that ban that there just wasn't any sort of way to meet the basis of what they needed to show to essentially discriminate against a subclass of people, which is transgender people. They even talk in the decision about how transgender people are sometimes referred to and provided like a quasi suspect class, um, which just provides us, protections of being like, are you targeting this politically disfavored and small group and
Mhm.
hurting them essentially for nothing more than their nothing more than their identity, and is there any sort of valid reason for that? And the court found, yes, you are, and no, there isn't. And so it will be very interesting to see the mental and legal gymnastics that the Supreme Court would have to undertake to justify that. This is why the midterms are so important, so that we can take back the Congress, and hopefully maybe we can sidestep that, because Congress should be actually the ones who are instituting the standards to join the military, not the executive actually. But ultimately, they did what the Supreme Court should have done, which is engage in this balancing test of like, what is the government's interest in keeping transgender people out? And they really did boil it down to transgender people, while the United States military and Trump and Hegseth are saying, oh, we're just trying to keep out people who have gender dysphoria because there's whole issues of military readiness and all of this other BS, honestly.
Hmm. Hmm.
They cut through it, and they even said something like, "Who should I believe? Don't trust your lying eyes," is what the Trump administration
Wow.
was literally trying to say to these people. And I thought that was brilliant and well said. But when you are this hateful and boisterous about being hateful, as the Trump administration is towards transgender people, this court, at least in particular, said, "No, we see personal animus here, and we
Mhm.
don't see a validation for it."
Mm.
Unlike in the sports case where they could at least hide behind safety
Yeah.
and competitive balance, although the court refused to actually get into those things because they're not actually implicated in that girl's um, particular instance. In this particular instance, the Trump administration doesn't even try to hide the
Yeah.
fact that these particular transgender people are well decorated.
Mhm.
They've served their country admirably, and ultimately, they will be very much hurt by having their careers stripped and ripped away from them. And if anybody who watches this either now, right now, or later on is like, "Well, what does this really matter?" The military is the biggest employer, the largest employer of transgender people in the United
Mhm.
States of America.
Wow. I don't think I
So
knew that.
think about it. They employ more people than anybody else. And there's a lot of, and if you just do the percentages, there's thousands and thousands of transgender people who were
So
kicked out of the military.
if
And so
we
you can't point to any other particular employer, really.
if we look at
And
the
so it really hurts
30,000.
the transgender community.
Well, absolutely. And as we're wrapping this up, Sophia, for people who aren't lawyers, who maybe feel overwhelmed by everything they're reading that's coming down from the circuit courts, the Supreme Courts, all the back and forth, juxtapositions, the contradictions, what is the biggest misconception about these cases? Why should, in your mind, every American, regardless of their identity, care about how the courts are answering these constitutional questions, regardless of where you might stand politically on these issues?
First they came.
Mm.
First they came.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think they're going to stop at a 1%
Mm.
population group,
Mm.
we are their test subject. We are their, easiest scapegoat. And
Mhm.
ultimately, also, the fascist playbook is create a scapegoat, say all your problems are that scapegoat's fault,
Mhm.
because you
Mhm.
can't really actually solve any of the real problems. You can't lower the
That's right.
cost of groceries. You
Mhm.
actually increase the cost of gas.
Mhm.
And you can't fix any of the actual difficult problems. So you create a problem that is easy to eradicate.
Mm.
And when you do eradicate that problem, who will they come for next?
Amen. That is so true. So well said. Sophia Zoe Kilmer, thank you so much, as always, for being on Facts Over Fear here with me and for sharing such incredibly important information with all of us. And after going to the dentist, no less, I appreciate you being here. If people want to follow you and learn more about what you do, where can they go?
They can follow me on Instagram, Sophia Zoe Kilmer,
What about your
ZOE.
website?
Defend trans rights for anybody who is in the community, the LGBTQ community, um, really trying to build out a community space for people who are in that space. Um, Whenever you need someone who's a lawyer, need legal guidance, I wanted to be there as someone who is in that LGBTQ community and space to because I feel like no one understands our struggles like us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you being here and sharing space. I appreciate to everybody that joined. Adam, thank you for saying awesome discussion. I thought so too. I know I always learn things when Sophia comes on the show. So I appreciate you guys. And until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks, Sophia.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime.